Alright, first off, what's up with the Woo dog collar?
Oh, that's for Leo.
Alright, what's the show, Tyler?
So the show this week is board control. We got questions back on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and we're here to answer them. So our first question, Carl Andreas.
Can I try this?
_ Baumgartner.
Karl Andreas Baumgartner.
I would like to have tips how to keep board control when I'm overpowered.
So to me, a couple of keys are you got to maintain body composure, and you got to maintain kind of your momentum over the kite. So the kite always tries to pull you over forward, which gets you off your edge and kind of drags you downwind. You want to lean in, and a key to that actually is to have the kite properly depowered. Because if your arms are too far stretched out, you're naturally being pulled over to the front, and that makes you lose that board control. So if you depower the kite and get those arms in a little bit further, your body automatically gets back further, and you kind of maintain the power and the control over the kite, pulling you over your edge. One thing that I find key to edging in these situations, it's a weird muscle that's in front of your shin, and I always notice that muscle when I'm in Cape Town because that's when I mostly ride overpowered. I almost call it the edging muscle. It's like when you pull in the front of your foot to kind of create that angle that allows you to kind of like stay back and keep that edge.
So another point too, when you're riding overpowered, like think about your harness and the other parts of your gear. That's going to really affect you. So if your harness is raised up high, obviously that's going to pull you forward more. It's pulling your shoulders forward over your hips again. So really think about that harness. Lock it as tight as you can. When you get in the water, that it's going to loosen up once it gets wet. So remember to retighten that down, keep it low.
Yeah, so take a second, kite at 12, pull on the center lines a little bit, get your harness down, wiggle it down, tighten it up. Don't let it come up too high.
In between jumps, I always kind of send the kite down low a little bit and push down here, push down there, get the harness like lower on your back so it doesn't create that leverage and momentum to really pull you over forward.
Look how high that harness is on that.
Yeah, that's
See that,
that's
guys?
too high.
That harness is way up there. It's almost the chicken loop's basically in
It's
his
okay
face.
because he's not super overpowered, but...
So jump
Sure.
higher in overpowered condition. Is it better to choose a smaller board to keep board control or to go down in kite size?
So I used to ride the pretty big board. I rode the 139. But the biggest factor for me was having the big fins on there in the overpowered conditions. Like that was what really made it. And the reason I rode a bigger board and also had a lot of rocker was so on those big landings, if you come down from really high, it's that'll soften it a little bit more. So the smaller boards, when you land, it's gonna hurt a bit more. Smaller boards are a lot easier to catch an edge. So when you're overpowered, you have that kind of factor. So having a bigger board gives you a little more surface area to kind of control. And so those fins are really gonna help you lock that in.
So I think we have fins. I have to say the smaller board, like especially in chop, is almost impossible to control. So I have to put that in brackets and say in butterfly water that we have at Pleasure Bay, the small board helps me personally, but Joshua rides a pretty big board, I think.
Yeah.
Nick rides a pretty big board, I think. So
I think he's on 135 right now, actually.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a nice middle ground.
Middle ground.
I think
yeah.
135, 136
Josh
is
is like 139.
yeah,
But he's a big guy as
dude.
well. Yeah, he's a
Yeah.
very big guy. Yeah.
So obviously it's relative to your personal size, so keep that in mind.
So do you think we've kind of overdone it with going out with big kites?
There's a certain point where
It
your
just-
kite is so big that when you send it overhead, it immediately tears you off the edge, and there's just nothing you can do.
Yeah, and then that's not fun.
Yeah,
Like,
and like
you're not gonna
it's
get
frustrating because you're like, why am I not going higher? But
Yeah.
it's because you're just getting pulled straight downwind for 200 meters, but you're maybe getting 10 meters of height.
Yeah. So this is a good one from Callie. It seems like I'm trying to learn to load and pop. I either A, immediately get pulled forward downwind when releasing my edge / not really getting pop, or B, kite kind of stalls out, I lose all board speed. So she sent us a video, which is great. What's that called on Tosh.0 when they do video breakdown? Callie's holding a pretty good edge coming up to it. She's really laying back into it, and then she kind of gives off too soon.
I think it's that
A little more speed.
She's almost popping as if she were unhooking, so she's dropping downwind a little bit.
Yep.
And then trying to come aggressively upwind and pop. I think it's more important in this
That one was
situation
better.
to just keep a very straight board angle and build up a lot of speed, and then just pop a little bit more. So it's more of a turn upwind as opposed to bearing off and then an aggressive pop upwind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, her board's kind of starting to, it flattens out right when she starts to pop, which is not what you want to do. You want to hold that edge all the way through.
Build speed for 50 to 100 meters at the exact same board angle. Find the micro adjustments that build you the most speed and the most power. Sort of a trade-off between the two, and then just send it like you're doing at the end.
And I think it seems to me that the board is almost a little bit too flat, right, towards the end, like generally. And this goes back to the edging muscles there, right?
Eric Blocker. I don't know why he's messaging us.
He jumps higher than all of us.
No. So when hitting a ramp, what's the most effective pop? Just hold edge and rush as fast as possible against the ramp, or try popping and push the back leg like on flat water?
So what I will say is when I watched Joshua pop off waves, what I was absolutely amazed by is the spray that flies off the top of that wave. And that tells me he pops really, really hard. So if you look at that kind of like splash that hits off that wave there, that's him really popping hard. Plus his legs are being like flipped back, right? Which is also a sign for a good pop.
Yeah, I see his body position's like he's going up that wave and it's not changing.
Yeah.
Right? He's still edge, 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 edge.
I think, Leo, is like what you told me in Cape Town the first time. Like, you eye that wave, you come up to it, and then as soon as you're about to hit it, you just think, you wave. And you just slam your back leg into the wave as hard as you can, and that gives you that launch upward. Sorry, friggy wave.
So to answer the question, I think it's almost both, right? You want to rush into the wave as fast as you can, but then you still want that pop. So it's like almost the impossible. And this is, I think, what Joshua, Nick, and Kevin have done so well that fewest are able to get, and I think neither of us have it perfectly as well, is the timing between sending the kite, blowing into that wave, and then having the strength as well to kind of sustain that pressure into that wave and pop into the wave. Mm-hmm. That requires athleticism and perfect timing and just the skill that those guys have.
So Alberto Alfonso, I was wondering if holding your edge, you should maintain the most upwind track as possible, or orthogonal to the wind direction.
But yeah, I think it's mostly about, it's not just about going as far upwind as possible, because that can sometimes slow you down and isn't really the best method. It's about speed, board angle, and max edge.
Could we say that a good measure for that is to find the angle against the wind that creates the most tension in your harness, in your lines, and everything, right?
I wouldn't say there's one right angle. It depends on the wind, depends on the water. It's all about the conditions.
It does, and I think that the key here really is that final angle. So you notice in this video where, and this is why the majority of people don't get the height. So if you edge upwind at the very last bit of your takeoff, that's where you get the height out of it. Whenever I'm trying to teach people how to jump and stuff, I always recommend, like, one thing you want to practice is practice kind of transitions, and it's the perfect point to do it because you're not pressured to jump and go far. Edge upwind as far as you can, like hold that edge, and then so as you bring the kite up and you're going to jump, the kite's right above you, edge as far upwind as possible, and you see how by doing that you're gonna go vertical, and you can almost stay pretty in place without going too far downwind. Whereas if you let that edge off a little bit too soon, you notice you're gonna go downwind on that transition. So I think that's a really good place to really practice that edging and notice really how much that angle upwind has an effect on the jump. So practice those on a jump transition. All right, so last question we got here from Augie_H. I'm jumping around 8 meters now, and I really want to go bigger. Is it just more wind? Good fins, the right board for you. Kickers, that was brought up before, is a good one. If you can pop off a kicker, it's going to give you that upward momentum. And especially if you hold that edge through that too. So if kind of work with the chop if you're in chop or whatever, and don't be afraid to experiment. Definitely kickers get you up there a little bit easier.
And I think as a general kind of thing, what we observe most and what people do wrong when they try to jump high is, one is they don't edge hard enough, and the second thing is they pull or sheet or pop too late, right? So they send the kite across 11, 12, 1, and then finally they jump. And they waste all that energy up there. So edge harder and pop sooner than you think you should.
One, come in maximum speed, maximum line tension, not necessarily just a direct upwind or direct downwind angle. Whatever can maximize the angle of the board to the water.
Honestly, like, that's the biggest thing I see that people have the most problem with is the edge, like, hands down. And that comes into factors where your harness could play a bit, the fins and things like that. Thanks for your questions, guys. Don't do kite loops just yet. See you next week.
See ya.
See you next week. Yeah.